I believed the great ideal. I believed in the great white ideal. If you did the crime, you did the time. It didn't matter who you were, and that was over with after that. And then, going through the carceral system was a huge eye opener, because I was one of those people that probably would have crossed the street if I saw a felon on the other side and knew it. But nobody wears a green neon sign that says felon. Nobody does. So for me, it was more of the submersive, going in and then having to live there and understand people. That's a big part of it. Is I was so disconnected in my thinking and in the reality of what the criminal justice system was that I didn't have that concept going in. I got it after I got there, and I saw all the things that were happening that were not fair, that were not just, that are not publicized, and I remember being outraged at it and thinking, how can people be treated like this? We're all humans. We're all citizens of the same country, but yet they're being treated like animals, housed in a cage, fed substandard food grade products. Like, at what point is that okay? At no point that should be okay. At no point should that be okay at all. Like, none of that should. My name's Kimiko, and I own my own business. I own Third Coast Professional Services. We do small home contracting and renovations. And I also work here at Legacy Farms, and I train younger horses, and some of them that are a little fractious. And right now I'm actually working with 2 horses, doing rehabilitating them. So, yeah.
Describe your upbringing and how it shaped your view of the world.
For me, I had a really good childhood, I don't think we didn't have everything, but we worked hard for what we had. And it kind of gave me the hindsight of, if you've did something wrong, do the crime, do the time. And then as growing up as an adult, I started realizing what that really meant, because when you're a kid, you have no concept of that. And you just know right and wrong. And at the same time, there's these, well, they're doing it, so that can't be that wrong. There's levels of wrong, right? When you're a kid, everything has a level of wrong. And so, yeah, I'd have to say that was kind of the biggest thing with my family is just, do right, treat people right, and take care of everybody around you and move forward. I didn't grow up in an area where there was a lot of crime or anything like that. So for me, that I don't think that's really where it started.
Where do you think it started?
Marrying, allowing myself to be the kind of person who was in relationships that were basically running my life. They weren't the kind that, I think, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this, because it was more of, you do everything to please the other person. You become a people pleaser. And I don't even know when that happened to me, because I never was as a kid. I was always like the random, oh no, let's do this, independent one. And then somewhere in my late teens, I fell into this people pleasing role, one bad breakup, and then, oh no, I need to please the next breakup. And it was like, I kind of got trapped in that horrible cycle and stuck there for quite a while, actually, when I think about it. That's where it would have started.
Yeah. Did you have role models growing up, and how did they influence your decisions?
You know what? I did. And I have to say, one of them that I really looked up to, she was not at all who I thought she was growing up. And then when I was around her for a few different times after I had turned 18, I was like, whoa, that is not what I remember as a kid. Even in 15, 16, even just a couple of years prior, she was kind of a double lifer, where it's do what I do, or do what I say, not do what I do. And so that was kind of like, wow, is everybody just fake people then? So you just kind of go with the flow. Is that what it is? You just sort of meld into whatever situation you're into and just roll with it. And I was like, wow, that's kind of deep. But I just remember that I looked up to her, and then it was really hard for me to look up to her after that, and thinking in hindsight now, like, you start regurgitating things when you think these questions through. I remember thinking to myself, well, if she can do it, I can do it. So what's the difference? People respect her. Kind of scary.
No, yeah, because it's if you have one like that you look up to
Mm-hmm.
and you have this vision of them, like you don't automatically, especially if it's good stuff. Like, why would you envision
Yeah.
like funky or
No.
crazy stuff
It's just
to?
like snaky backdoor stuff that I what?
It does. It does.
It
It's
messed with
like
my head. Like for sure. It was not okay. And in hindsight, I see that. But as a kid, I was like, oh, so it's do what it takes to get to the top.
mm,
But that's really not meant the way she was doing it.
mm-hmm.
And that's where, as a young impressionable kid, I kind of got caught in that cycle of, oh, this is how it's got to be done, because I didn't really have any other strong female role models. And it was like, okay, that's the hustle.
You said that you say that had a big impact on your view of
Mm-hmm.
others going forward, like just other people in general.
I think it did to a point, because it always made me be suspicious for a long time. And once you get around people who are just genuinely who they are, that goes away. It's like you stop doing that. You catch yourself more and more to the point where you just don't do it anymore. And it took me a lot of years to get out of that. Stop being paranoid about it. Well, what are they calling for? What do you really want? Like it's hard, because sometimes now there's people I sit back and I'm like, hmm, what do you really want? You know what I mean? Like you constantly are just suspicious, almost paranoid about it to a point. And I'm just to the point in my life now where I'm just going along and saying, I'm taking it at face value unless you prove to me that's not what it is. And then once you do that, don't ring my number, because that just like lets me know that it's out. That was the first stepping stone, because I was following in shoes that I wasn't meant to fill, and learning that the things that she was doing weren't appropriate, even though it's acceptable. It's like looking at some politicians and you're like, oh, wow, they're collecting all this and doing that. And then behind the scenes, they're doing other stuff. So it was kind of like that to me. It was like, oh, well, as long as nobody knows, who cares? And then when you grow up all the way, and you start realizing this is not how it is. And then you fight so hard to get out of that trap that you're already in, and come full circle. I think a lot of it had to do with my perspective on things and changing how I saw people. Because now when I see people, I take them at face value and I listen. I don't just go along with the flow. I really listen so that I can decide if this is okay or not. Because there's more of it that isn't okay than is, I've noticed. Your circle of genuine people gets smaller and smaller, I guess.
Were there any warning signs or moments where you thought your life could have taken a different direction than it did?
You know, if I had reached out and gotten counseling and been around more positive people, I think that would have helped me. But at the time when you're in it, you're not thinking about that. That is definitely not
That's
what you're thinking
facts.
about. I mean, I would love to say, oh, there's that little prick of a conscience, but it was not. There was not. And I think once you get past that, you kind of, you're like, well, I'm in it now.
I would even say that your conscience was there because you
Yeah.
knew it. A lot of us,
Hmm.
like at least in my opinion, I feel like a lot of us know
Yeah.
like what we're doing at the time is wrong,
Yeah.
and it's just it is what it is.
We just don't care. We're not focusing on that. We're
Yeah.
focusing on something else. So we're like, well, what? I'm just going to do this, And then in hindsight, you sit back and you're like, dang, what was I really thinking? And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint.
No, it is
And so I go back and I think,
because it
I
could be so,
know.
it's so many things.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
so many
yeah.
things, and just the influence and interaction
Mm-hmm.
amongst themselves. It's just
No, because you sit back and you start wondering, is this really why? Because I can remember thinking, how did I end up here?
mm,
And just going back and forth with it over the years. And I started realizing that's how I ended up there. If I have to question it, if I have to question it, walk away. That's one of
the
that's one.
question of why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel
Mm-hmm.
that.
Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
a telltale of a lot of things.
a
Like,
lot of things,
yeah,
because you pop up and then you're like, oh, this might not be quite what I was planning on. And then there it is. You were planning on something that you didn't even know. And you get there, it's a whole different deal. And is it then you have that choice, right? Then you're trying to make that decision. Do I want to go with this flow or should I get out now? And that's, I think, for a lot of people, they worry about burning friendships, they worry about disappointing people, they worry about how it looks to the public. And there's something to be said for people who get to a point in their life where, the I don't give a fuck kicks in. And at some point it does kick in and you realize you have to be about you. You can't be worried about how other people are going to perceive what you're doing. You just can't.
What changed your mind about the people that were incarcerated when you got inside? Considering women, they only go to one facility.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Huron Valley is well
Hmm.
known.
Yeah, and it's so overcrowded. For me, what changed my mind? It was literally sitting on the yard, sitting in the day room and listening and paying attention and genuinely listening, not just hearing stories, but really taking them to heart and understanding how this happened. And I know of so many people who've come home since then, and I look at why were they there in the first place? Okay, ooh, yeah, all right, but you're not going to do that again. I look at, I think I listened and I actually opened myself up to allowing myself to understand circumstances that were not mine and not just saying, oh, well, they did that. They're just, trap house dwellers and the bottom of the earth. They live in a barrel or whatever. No, it wasn't that at all. In fact, the majority of the women there were not that at all. You know, there's only a small amount of people compared to the general population that's full time there, right? The rest of them are transient. They're coming for a year, 2 years, 3 years, in and out. There's not as many going for 6+ as there is under 6. So understanding that and looking at that was really an eye opener. And I got put in level 2, which is where all your 6 years or more. So people who are there for life sentences go. And
Yeah,
meeting
it's
them,
strange because that's not how it used to be.
yeah, I
You
only
used to have
had,
to do at least 4 to 5 years in a level 4 before you could even go to a level 2, let alone have a life. So, like lifers weren't even able to go to a level 2 at the time.
yeah, now it's 9 in a day.
Yeah.
So I was in with people who, and most of the people in the unit I was in had already done 10 plus.
Mm.
So they were all settled in and, pretty much homey. And it had kind of, knew how things were going to go, how to work each officer. And I was sitting back thinking, what does this mean? This is a lot of moving parts, and then I'm watching and I'm looking and I'm listening, and it's a whole different culture inside. It's a whole different societal hierarchy inside. And one of the things that I discovered is it really isn't so different as out here. It's just in a gated community, you know. Um, One of the things that I remember thinking was I had went to I had never understood what the whole unit rep thing was the first year I was there. And one of my bunkies, we were reading the notes, the minutes from one of the meetings, and she was like, well, how are they going to fix this? They can't fix this. And the warden just shut them down. And I remember looking at it and thinking, well, is there codes that go with this? Is there like laws that go with this? And she's like, yeah, you can get them at the law library. And I was like, well, that's all they have to do is go there. And she's like, well, honey, they can't read it and they don't understand it. And I just looked at her and I said, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't have a high school diploma, right? 70% of them didn't. They didn't even have a GED. I had no concept of that. So I felt like they were people being taken advantage of because they weren't as educated as the next person who might be able to fight their way out of that paper bag. So I ended up going to the law library and then studying in the law library for a couple of months and realized, oh no. So then I started fighting my own case and won my Supreme Court decision on my appeal. And I can remember thinking, well, that wasn't that hard. It just takes a lot of research, and understanding what the words will, shall, and must mean, because those 3 words all sound like the same thing, but they're not at all. So that took me into the warden's forum. So I ran for unit rep, and won it, and then went to the forum and sat and listened to the chair. And, you know, the woman had the biggest heart in the world and had all the right ideas, but, society did her no justice with her lack of education. And she couldn't afford to get a GED because she had to pay for the classes. So if she had, it would have changed how she moved in different ways and in different circles. And that was what was frightening to me, is seeing all these highly intelligent women having education withheld from them just because they had long and indeterminate sentences. So you can't get educated because you're going to be here a while. To me, that was horrific. That's just continuing to create a broken society within a community. It's the same thing. So one of the things I can remember, it was the going to chow hall, and we were getting shuffled in and shuffled out, and our 15 minutes included the time we stood in the line. And what was pivotal for me about that was she had taken that to the forum and said, we have 20 minutes to eat, and you're hauling us in and out of here like cows to be fed, chasing us in and out. And we don't even get that. By the time we sit down, we have 5 minutes to inhale all of it and get back outside in the freezing cold. And I started realizing that when you don't have the ability to fight for yourself, you struggle. And even though they knew what they wanted, they didn't know how to shape it to accommodate to get results. So for me, it was a matter of, is there a policy about that? Because I'm like, I don't know. So I went and I looked and I got the policy, and we fought it. And it was really, really cool because the same thing was said, but just in a way that our warden would accept it, not as dirt being thrown in his face, but as a group of women truly looking for and providing an answer. Because you can ask the questions and present the problems all you want, but really you need to be a part of that change too. You have to be a part of the solution. And how much power do you have in prison? Well, you have the power of the pen. It's the most powerful thing on the planet. And learning that and having the women understand that, if you have the power of the pen and policy and MCL backing you, you can get what you want. You just have to know how to ask for it. And so the next forum, she posed the same question, only she reframed it to, according to this policy, we're allotted this much time to sit down and eat our meals. When will you be affecting your policy? And it changed it because now it's been put in his lap that his guards aren't doing what they should. And he needs to address that, as opposed to having it be all just about us. It's still about us, right? But it's being done in a way that prompts a person to action. And so that's when I realized these people are just they're trapped in a cycle. And it made my heart change because I felt like you can't beat someone every day and expect them to change. You can't do that. At some point, you have to have empathy and compassion and use those things in your teaching so that people can grow past that. If they can't grow past the cage they're trapped in, and especially with their minds, they're never going to make it out. So that's what started changing how I saw people who were incarcerated, when I saw them become people to me and not just prisoners, not just felons and convicts. That's what changed my thinking, is really understanding they were people, not just warehoused. Somehow it's the out of sight, out of mind. Oh, they're criminals, they're felons, ignore them. Are they bothering you right now? No, they're in prison. Who cares? And getting past that and understanding that, man, their families care. My family cares, and it all becomes real, as opposed to, just something fictional we hear about. And I think that was big for me, understanding that it's like a college campus. It's not what people think it is.
Speaking of misconceptions, what do you think the biggest misconception people have about people who have been incarcerated or who are incarcerated?
Well, the biggest one is that they'll always be that way. They'll always be on the take. They're always going to be looking for the next criminal thing to do. And it's definitely not the case. most of them are just sitting there just so discouraged by the decisions and the choices that they made that they don't know how to get past it. Even though they may have all the tools in their box to make better decisions, it's getting past that one guilty hurdle of being there, doing what they did to get them there, and then coming home and living that down. That's huge.
And that's not necessarily easy to do, considering every
No.
door you knock on that you hope that'll take you and your dream or your goals to the next level is met with scrutiny simply because you have a felon tag on your lap.
Right. And the problem with that is it's so easy to get felonies in the state of Michigan. Have a couple drinks at the bar, get in your car, felony. Bounce a check $100 or more, felony. The mother who bought groceries for her 3 little kids in between unemployment checks, felony. So that's the hard part. If you get caught in that cycle, then what do? It just spirals. And until we start taking responsibility as communities and become leaders amongst ourselves, it's going to keep happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the problem we have as a society now. Everybody is really super self-entitled, but when it comes right down to it, the only way to be independent, like, I want to be independent, I don't want to rely on anybody, that is a farce. And a lot of people would say, no, that's not true. I have plenty of money. I'm completely independent. Okay. Tell me how. You're dependent on somebody to build a car you want to buy. You're dependent on somebody to do the laundry. You're dependent on the guys who fix the streets. You're dependent on the electric company. You are completely interdependent with everyone around you. Your mailman, the tech companies, the cell phone company. You're not independent. You just think you are. And I think that's the biggest thing is we have this sense of what independence really is. And it's really learning how to be interdependent and supportive of each other, whether it's through, commercial outlets like an electric company or, groups that get together and say, hey, let's talk about real things. Let's have a circle. Let's sit down. What's really on your mind? I don't know how I'm going to pay my electric bill this month. What's really on your mind? Man, I don't know. My baby mama's acting crazy, because we used to be parish communities. And then, once COVID hit, the last shreds of that were gone. It seems like everyone being isolated for so long rebuilt that paranoia, that stay away from each other, that they're on their own kind of attitude, and it's really unfortunate because we're not doing our society any favors or our communities.
Looking back, do you think there were any resources or interventions that could have kept you from...
Yeah, I think it had somebody snatched me by my ponytail and sat me down and said, what in the fuck are you doing? Yeah, that would have changed a lot of it, but being the kid on my own and I'm going to prove it to the world, I wouldn't have listened anyway. Stubborn is as stubborn is, and I look back on it and, I remember things that I did as a kid even. Okay, case in point. I had never seen the Northern Lights before. Have you seen them?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God. So this will tell you how naive I was. When I first moved up to Michigan, to Northern Michigan, and the Northern Lights I've never seen anything like it. You see on TV rockets going through the sky and all this stuff, right? And you see the big red flares and pink flares and all that, right? So I'm driving along. You saw it as driving out here, big open expanses. So in my mind, it is the end of the world because I am seeing some crazy stuff because this is what's going across. This was off my back deck. This is what's happening to the sky. What do you think this is? Like, this is the Northern Lights. And I'm thinking it's bombs being dropped just far enough away that I can't quite see it. I mean, I was young. I was a young teenager. And I called my dad bawling. I told him the world was ending. I broke Grandma's lamp. I hid the key to the door after I snuck it. I mean, I told him everything. The first time I smoked weed. Oh my God, I stole it out of your box. I'm so sorry. I mean, I told him everything. I revealed every sin a kid could do. And I had, older brothers, so I was pretty wild. And I had to keep up with them, And so my point being is when you have that moment of clarity, you start thinking to yourself, huh, yeah, I got to find redemption somewhere in here. And I think that's a big part of it is we kind of forget that we are accountable to each other. So that made me be real accountable to my dad. And I remember going, hello, hello. He's like, what is it that you're seeing? We are not being bombed. And I'm like, well, it's flashing all, and we didn't have the cameras on the phones back then. I'm like, it's flashing streaks through the sky. And he's like, those are called Aurora Borealis. And I was like, what is that? What kind of bomb is that? And I mean, you got to remember, this was right around the time we were in Afghanistan. And,
Mm-hmm.
so I thought for sure we were being bombed back. And it was, one of those things you learn as a kid. You learn to be bigger than that. And I mean, that traumatized me to senses. It kind of took me a few steps forward that I needed at the time, especially, or I would have been much worse off. Much worse off. Yeah. So, as I was like, this can't be happening.
How has being labeled a felon affected your opportunities and relationships since you've been raised?
It's really interesting. Um, So when I went in, I had a lot of people who just couldn't even comprehend that. They were like, "You? What?" Because I had learned to live the facade. You learn to live it. And getting hemmed up and, making stupid choices. I think it kind of makes you realize that you have got to change somewhere, you know? And being labeled that now has really housing was the biggest issue when I came home because nobody, oh yeah, there's felon friendly apartments if you have a credit score of 750 to 800. So that's bullshit because nobody coming out of the joint has a credit score that high. Heck, most of us don't have one
Wow, that's
now.
funny. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. Oh, we house felons. Absolutely. Come apply. And what's your credit score,
Yeah,
baby?
you got 5 times the rent like in your check coming every month.
I mean, it gets crazy. And so they offer it so that they can say that they're not, not compliant, but they offer it and then put the catch 22 in there. So it's pointless. So I think for us, like land contract in the beginning, because you couldn't get a loan, you had no credit history, right? So you're starting all over. And for me, it was like one of those things where I just said, you know what? I'm going to find a way to do this. And I did. And up here, we don't have the resources like down in the city, Washtenaw, Wayne, Oakland. You guys have tons of resources down there. We don't have that up here. We're kind of like a collective group all onto our own, and we work with each other and help each other through it. And, most of the guys I have on staff have felonies, and they're no different than the guy next door.
How does that work? Like, how do you find these guys?
So I work a lot with the county's parole agents, and they'll call me when they have guys coming home who have construction background and say, hey, he's going to need employment. We'd like to give him your number. And then they give me a call. And typically I require that they've taken building trades. So then they know that they have a good hand skills base and that they don't have a B&E unless you guys want to bond them. And so some of them will come out and they'll get bonded, which that works too. I just want to make sure I don't have clients that are going to get robbed.
Yeah.
Because people who've only done a year or two, as you know, tend to go back.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's because they just didn't have enough mental health time, enough time to really grow beyond, where they were in the first place. But yeah, no, it actually works out really good. And so then we provide that service, and then we help set them up with AA meetings if they need them, NA meetings. And we have a few different people that we work with in the community that do low income rentals that are homes that we've renovated into multi-apartment units. And it allows them to have a place to stay without having to have a whole background check and all that. So we do require that they take care of their apartments. They keep them clean. They can be inspected. And we'll do pop-in inspections even because we're vouching for them. So, but yeah, we've been pretty fortunate. We haven't had anybody that's been crazy or that's ended up going back. So, it just kind of told me a lot about who is there and who is coming home. People don't want to be there.
What are some of the things? What are some of the doors that were closed to you that you had once wanted to go through? Now that you're a felon.
Honestly, it becomes breaking down barriers, because like right now I'm working on my builder's license, and one of those things is you can't have fraud charges and get your builder's license, because you could offer to build somebody's house, take their money, and dip, commit fraud. And so in the beginning, I was shut down, but now at this point, I have personal references from other builders, from supply chain owners who I do accounts with, and they're all willing to write Laura and vouch for me and say yes, oh no, and even building inspectors who I've worked with this last week, and one of them, they're not supposed to, but they've been recommending me to other homeowners to say, hey, I know this builder's walked off or he's on his way to jail. Would you like us to give your number to this person, or we can give you her number and you can call and see if she can help you out. And so it's been pretty cool to see that. And even he told me, he said, Kim, go get it. Just go get it. And I said, well, here's the deal. And he said, you just need your references. He said, you'll be fine. So now here we go. We're going to try it again. And so this winter I'll be testing again, because it's not for lack of passing it. It's for the history that we have. So that's where my challenge comes in. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is challenging the state, because you have building trades. So are you telling me that I can only ever be a laborer? I can never be a business owner or someone that runs a job site? Because right now I work for several builders and I run all their projects. The only thing I don't have is a license. Essentially all they do is sign the paperwork, and then me and my guys do all the work. They show up at the end to do what? Say thanks, great project. That's about it, because the inspectors come in and do their inspections like normal, And so if I'm passing all of those now, there's no reason that I shouldn't. And so that was the inspector's point. He's like, Kim, you just need to do it. So that's the goal.
What advice would you give to someone growing up in circumstances similar to yours?
Slow down. Just slow the fuck down. You really have to stop and understand the world, because so many times we think we do, and we get, when you're 15, you're 21. you're sure you're 21 at 15. I don't know a kid that doesn't. And if you can convince them to just slow down, enjoy the lack of responsibility, and just build your moral character. It's easy to say, it's hard to do, but it is probably, if we could master a formula for that, and that's across the board. I don't care what kind of background you grew up in. I think if we could master that formula, it would seriously change society and how our communities are. That'd be the biggest.